How are you? Sandy Fisher with Inovonics here. Thanks for joining today in our Lunch and Learn. I'll wait for the room to fill up a little bit, and then we'll go ahead and begin. Just give it a few more minutes. You can see you guys coming in. Okay, you know what? Let's just go ahead and jump right into this. I know you guys are busy working on quotes, getting some jobs lined up. So let's talk about what Inovonics can do for you. So Inovonics is a life safety 900 megahertz frequency hopping spread spectrum wireless specifically for life safety applications in the security industry. And I will give you a little bit of a technology overview to explain what the frequency of 900 and the associated wavelength means, as well as what frequency hopping means. But in addition to those advantages of the frequency and the wavelength and how they propagate in between metal in walls, we also are sending just a very, very small amount of data. That's called a small bandwidth, and that enables the receiver to hear a lower signal. So that also contributes to our long range. And we do all of those things with a nice low current draw by the transmitter, so they get nice long battery life. This does not require any kind of IT management. It's completely separate from Wi-Fi, for example. So I will take you through a look at our wireless repeaters. That's how we cover large job sites. We'll go over all the transmitters and sensors and how we integrate into any and every kind of physical security platform one way or another. And the bottom line is we are well known for being the best choice of wireless in life safety applications within the security industry. That is our very well-known reputation. A couple of advantages of wireless that I want to talk about. First, in the realm of risk management, think of this as cost-effective risk mitigation, and that's really the name of the game as far as what we do with our end-user clients in the industry. We help them reduce the outcome, which is risk, of a threat having occurred. So think about panic alarms in a behavioral health setting. So the owners of that facility want the staff to be safe as they're visiting with clients. So on one extreme, they could do nothing and say, okay, if you get in trouble, just start yelling and screaming or call someone on your phone for help. So that might not cost anything, but it's also not going to be very effective. On the other end of that spectrum, they could hire a bodyguard for each and every person, which would be very effective, but also cost prohibitive. So a good middle ground would be to establish policies and procedures in concert with giving panic buttons to all the healthcare workers so that when they get in trouble, they know what to do and they can hit their button and then there will be a response. So keep that in mind as you're evaluating any physical security scenario that you're working out with your customers. We'll talk a little bit about video and access control as far as how our alarm capabilities interface with those kinds of systems, in addition to how we are more traditionally used, which would be with alarm panels. With video, think about motion-triggered video in challenging scenes. So I'll talk about that, as well as uncontrolled openings, so side doors and back doors in access control systems, and what we can do to monitor those, as well as to trigger things like lockdown events and accomplish door release. So first, on access control, imagine a side door or a back door, and you would simply have a transmitter with a contact on that uncontrolled opening, as I called it, and then this is what the installation would look like. We have a 4-channel receiver that would connect to a spare input on any one of the door controllers. So when that transmitter is activated, it's going to log that that door was open. It'll also log when it was closed. And from there, you can provide an alert of a propped door. You can also use a panic button, and that could accomplish or released by a receptionist. You always want to go into a port on a controller, not directly into the strike if you can avoid it. But again, that can also activate lockdown system-wide if there's a threat at a school, such as a violent attack, a civil disturbance, or even a proximity of a dangerous animal in the neighborhood of the school. As far as how we play meaningfully in video systems, think about how when a camera's onboard VMD, video motion detection, results in a lot of useless footage because of well, for example, at night when a camera's automatic gain control turns on, that can introduce noise into the picture, and those pixel changes can be misinterpreted as motion. Or if a camera is looking at a scene outdoors or at a distance and there's moving foliage, that can also be misinterpreted as motion. And when those events happen, that takes the operator's attention away from real events because they're looking at what essentially amount to distractions. So an external motion sensor going into a direct interface, if it exists on the video system for folks like Genetec and Milestone, or one of our motions or an outdoor optics motion, which I'll show you about later, can be programmed into one of our relay output receivers that would be connected right to a camera's alarm input. So that can make motion detected video a lot more meaningful and make much better use of that human resource, which is the attention of the operator. Also, think about perimeters, and if you can detect an intruder sooner on their path toward their target, whatever that may be, that can give the response more time to get there and to neutralize that adversary. So think about, again, outdoor motion, detecting motion or an intrusion in an isolation zone as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about those coming up. First, just a little bit more on the technology. Our 900 megahertz is frequency hopping, meaning when a transmitter sends an alarm message, it's going to pick a channel between 902 and 928 megahertz, send a message, then it hops over to another channel and sends that again, and it does that about 20 times. So if there's interference in any areas of that spectrum band, the other messages get through. It's nothing you need to set up or configure, it just works automatically. And I can tell you our transmitters are installed at every major US airport used by the security personnel when they're screening baggage, and if they see something that they don't like, they can hit the button, especially if there's a disturbance. They can hit the button and you can imagine what the response would be. But my point is, an airport is an example of an environment where there's a lot of radio interference. With regard to frequency, so 900 megahertz is a really good choice for commercial, whereas in residential wireless, that's going to be, for the most part, 300 and 400 megahertz. The difference is in commercial, and look at this picture on the right, there's a lot of metal. So if you were to get rid of all the drywall and the concrete, you would see a lot of pipes and metal studs and conduit and ducting and wiring and things like that. That's what the signal has to propagate through. And that's what 900 megahertz does because it has that shorter wavelength. And a great analogy, a great way to think about what's going on is, think about 900. The higher the frequency, the shorter the wavelength. So 900 is like a baseball, 300, which is residential grade, is more like a basketball. So when you throw them both, the larger object, the basketball, is going to bounce off a stud, but the smaller baseball size object will get through. So that's a really good analogy for what 900 megahertz is doing. So the repeaters, this is a unique thing to Inovonics, is at 900 megahertz, the ability to go transmitter to repeater to repeater to repeater to repeater. So these are not wired to each other or back to the head end. They just take standard plug-in line power. And again, you can do up to 10 repeater hops. And this is how we scale from maybe a small retail establishment that might need one or not even any repeaters at all, up to a high-rise hospital that might take 20 or 30 repeaters. You can program them into the system as supervised endpoints as well, so you get an immediate fault notification if there's an AC power loss and it switches over to its onboard backup battery, or if there's a case tamper. These are also UL listed for commercial Berg. So those are the repeaters. Let's talk about some of the alarm panels that we interface with. So we have a receiver, this EN7290, that will sit on the ECP bus of a Honeywell Vista panel. And I believe when Honeywell Pro Series comes out, we're going to go into that as well, either through some new means, or I've heard it's also going to have an ECP bus. So we will also be included in the upcoming new Honeywell control panel releases. Gives you full point-to-point. You don't need any expander modules or extra power supplies like we did when we used to just use our add-on receivers to go into Honeywell before this interface existed. So that really brought the cost down a lot. You do register the transmitters into this particular receiver so that only the transmitters in that system will go into that Honeywell panel, but it is set up exactly like how Honeywell Wireless is set up. So that means if your installers already know how to program Honeywell Wireless, that means they already know how to program Inovonics Wireless for those larger commercial jobs as well. And again, a number of UL commercial Berg listings are included with that. All right, if you use Bosch, we go into Bosch B series and G series panels. The receiver interface is actually a Bosch part number, EN-KIT-SDI2. That will go into the GV4 platform, as well as the 9512 and any of the B series panels. And that interface supports hundreds of endpoints as well. So any of our direct panel interfaces will support as many transmitters as the panel has zones. So in the case of a Honeywell Vista, you can do 127 on a Vista 128, 249 on a Vista 250, and up to, I think it's 300 on a Bosch 9512. So that's our Bosch and our Honeywell interfaces. We also go into ICT Protege, which is an emerging combo access control and intrusion platform. We go into RS2 and open options with the direct interface. Those are access control platforms. And then we are also seeing more opportunities to go into building management platforms via an interoperability standard called Bacnet. Bacnet is a very healthy mindset of an interoperability standard designed for building management, but a number of systems do also handle physical security, and these systems are starting to talk to each other more and more. So we have a receiver that talks Bacnet that could go into Genetec. It can go into Delta Controls and Allerton and Distech and Johnson Controls Metasys and all kinds of building management platforms. And our security devices would be seen as what's called binary inputs. And we have a couple of environmental points for temperature and humidity, which would populate in there as analog inputs. And that opens up just an entire myriad of applications for our wireless technology to not only increase life safety with security sensors, but to enhance occupant comfort and even energy savings with occupancy sensing in conference rooms, for example. For anything that we don't have a specific interface for, which would be all the ones that I just mentioned, we have what we call our add-on receivers that give you Form C relay outputs, and those will go into anything. And they come in 3 sizes, small, medium, and large. And when we're done here, if you like, I can email you our product guide if you don't have it already, and that gives you the rundown of all of our part numbers, as well as what these receivers look like, how many points they handle, and how many alarm outputs they have. And those zone alarm outputs, or those relay alarm outputs, are going to connect into relay inputs, like I said, on maybe a DSC panel or an iStar panel on a software house system, or into zones in a dialer, or whatever it is needed to accomplish the application. All right, let's jump into the transmitters. So first we've got our universal transmitters or door sensors. Here's the part numbers. You can get just the plain version where you can attach any door contact, whether it's for a regular man door, an exterior metal door. It can be a recessed contact, a surface contact, a roof hatch contact. We do have the version of the transmitter that has a reed switch on board, comes with a magnet, so you line up the magnet and the transmitter on the door frame in the door. So you open the door, the magnet moves away, and the transmitter sends your alarm right away. We do have a couple of versions of this transmitter with a wall tamper, which makes it able to have a UL commercial Berg listing, which we do have. So those are the two on the right. We do have a dual input standard power and a dual input longer range transmitter. If you have an application where you need longer range out of a transmitter, but maybe you can't get line power for a repeater in between, maybe you're going across a large field, that's what the EN1252 is. And the 1212 will take two contacts going into one transmitter. Maybe they're neighboring windows or neighboring doors. Keep in mind the interface has to support that. So the Honeywell interface will support it. In other words, you would see it as two separate zones. The add-on receivers with the MR on the end of the part number will also allow you to distinguish two separate zones from one transmitter. For indoor motion detection, we have a few options. This top one is our probably most commonly deployed motion. It's a decent single tech PIR, 50 by 50, 90 degrees. Then you can swap out that plastic Fresnel lens on the bottom and make it into a 100-foot curtain. This one in the middle, the EN1262, is a Bosch motion with our transmitter built in. It's a very nice PET immune unit. The one on the bottom, EN1265, I believe that has a UL listing, commercial Berg, and is a 360 ceiling mount, 14-foot ceiling height with a 60-foot diameter of coverage on the floor. Then you can swap the cap and get a long-range cap for a high ceiling, which would give you that 60-foot diameter on the floor when it's mounted at a height of 25 feet. And if it's mounted somewhere in between, the radius on the floor would be reduced. So I'll leave it to you and your commercial estimators to conduct those geometric calculations if you have say a 20-foot ceiling or a 10-foot ceiling to determine what the coverage would be. We have a very nice PIR here. It is a single board with our transmitter on it, much bigger battery for a longer battery life. That's also a quad element PIR, meaning it needs to see motion crossing zones left and right and up and down. So that gives you a little bit better false alarm immunity, and also makes it eligible for a UL listing, which we also have. Panic buttons. So we have a number of options here. The EN1223 pair, those are on the upper left. Those are water resistant. If the part number ends in a D, that's a double button, meaning you press both buttons at the same time to activate it. So if you press one button by itself, nothing will happen. So that's how we reduce those nuisance alarms. The EN1223S is available. That's better suited for a nurse call, but it will work with any of our receivers. So those two come with an accessory pack that has a neck chain and a belt clip. On the bottom left, EN1233s, that's neck chain. So they're worn around the neck. The EN1235D and EN1235S on the upper right, those have a very sturdy belt clip. Then on the lower right, the EN1235 SF and DF, the F stands for fixed, so you can mount it on a wall or under a table, and it's got a tamper spring, and that makes it eligible for a UL listing, which we have. Now the 1233s and 1235s can also be mounted. It's the same housing. So you just drill the knockout and you can mount them just as you would the SF and DF versions. Next, we've got the bill trap, the EN1249. And what I really like about this is it's a great duress alarm device. So duress, by definition, is a discretely activated panic alarm. So that is the size of our money, both US and Canada. So that would go in the hundreds slot of a cash drawer. You tuck the bottom bill under that flap, then and that breaks the contact. Then you put all the other hundreds on top of it. So if a clerk or a teller is held up, they pull all the bills out. And when you pull that bottom bill, that makes the contact touch, so the transmitter sends an alarm message. That could go to a zone on an alarm panel or to a directly to a camera's alarm input that is trained on that cache handling position. So great way to get a video of a duress alarm event in progress. And if there is a concern for nuisance alarms, when the clerk or teller pulls the last bill out by mistake, you set the jumper to delay. So if they pull it out by mistake, they can put it back in within, I think, 9 or 10 seconds, and they won't get that false alarm. So that's the bill trap. The glass break, 20-foot range of sensing the frequencies associated with breaking framed glass. All right. We do have a smoke. It's UL residential, not UL commercial. So if you're doing condos, or the AHJ says that that will be considered residential, you can use it. But again, not for UL 864. We do have a CO detector. That's our EN 1245. That is UL 2075, which is a system listing. That's a system sensor, commercial grade sensor for hospitality environments. So that's those transmitters. You know what? Let me back up one sec. I don't have a slide here for it at the moment, but we do have a UL 864 commercial fire offering. It's a single endpoint, and if you want to know more about it, I can follow up and I can email you that brochure. That would be for a switch or a valve, or like a PIVA, post indicator valve. Maybe it's across the building, it's across the parking lot, or it's across the street, and it's really hard and expensive to get a wire to it. So we have a UL 864 version of our universal transmitter that would attach on that switch. Then we have a receiver with relays that would go into any fire alarm control panel. And that can eliminate a lot of expense. In fact, that can even be installed in a remote building's fire panel, which can bring an alarm condition of a remote building's fire system into the fire system of the main building. So it'll save on getting monitoring infrastructure wire over to that building, and it can even save on the monthly expense of a second monitored account, because it can all go on the main building's fire account. So a lot of value in our UL 864 commercial fire offering. Okay, a couple more transmitters. We have a water detector, so it will go into alarm if there's standing water on the floor. This can prevent, in one case in a high-rise building, we had a story that it prevented about $1 million worth of water damage. So you put the transmitter on the wall and you connect it to the water probe, which would stick onto the floor. So that's our water detector. We do have a temperature alarm, which would go into an alarm panel, great for IT rooms. You know, when you have a room full of servers and switches that are running the access control and the video system, if that room has an air conditioning failure and everything gets hot and starts failing, that's going to be expensive damage as well as downtime. This temperature alarm, you just stick it on the wall and it will alarm when it gets too warm, which can prevent all of that. You can even program it with a little program you get from our website and change the high and the low set points. And you can even use this external probe and stick it inside any kind of a cold storage environment. It can even go inside a freezer. Okay, for outdoor motion or specialty or harsh environments, we send a bunch of OEM transmitters by the bucketful to Optex, which is a world-renowned motion sensor manufacturer, a great sensor partner of Inovonics. And they build them into all these things, which is called I-Series. And I'd be happy to get you the latest I-Series book that shows all of these different detectors. In fact, they've got some that look a lot newer and nicer than these. These ones on the left are a little bit older. They still work and they're still sold, but the newer ones look really, really slick. And there's PIRs, different coverage patterns, different mounting heights. You can shoot down a long row of dock doors with a set of the PE beams, which would be active IR or line detection. They've got a double stack that'll go 350 feet. So these are great for outdoor situations, perimeters, things like that. So one of their outdoor PIRs, the newer one, is a quad element. Then they've even got a couple of dual techs, which are PIR microwave. They've got some anti-sway technology in their processing, so they have really gotten really good at nuisance alarm discrimination. So that's Optex I series, and they work with all of our receivers. Here is an application you can do to accomplish a remote annunciator, whether it's a strobe or a siren. What you would do is take a universal transmitter and put it on the auxiliary output of the alarm panel's auxiliary relay and set that up so that when the panel goes into alarm, it activates that transmitter. That transmitter would be programmed out to a receiver out in the field, like at a remote guard shack, for example. So when the panel goes into alarm, maybe they haven't got a keypad out there, but they'll know if there's an alarm in progress, and then they can initiate their response procedures appropriately. So you would just set that up with the 12-volt power supply or receiver and the annunciator of your choice. Finally, we have a wireless survey kit. It works with an app on your phone, and this is the range testing device, which will take the guesswork out of how many repeaters you need and where they go. And we've even got a little cartoon that shows you how it works. So you actually survey the site in the reverse direction. That makes it easy for one person to do a site survey on your own. You put the little heartbeat transmitter that comes with the kit where the panel and the receiver are going to be. Then you walk around with the little survey kit receiver on your belt. It connects to your phone via Bluetooth, and that will show you the signal strength. So in this picture, anything in that red circle would be heard directly by the receiver. Then you move the transmitter to where you can get a repeater. And a repeater, in most cases, you want to get it out of harm's way, in every case actually. So a good place could be a utility closet or an IDF or an MDF where you have line power and you can lock it up. You put the transmitter there, then you keep walking with your survey kit, and that will extend your distance of coverage. So anything in the green circle would be relayed into the receiver by that repeater. If there is some overlap, if a transmitter is heard by the receiver and the repeater, no problem. We resolve that. We call that redundant message handling, so it's nothing for you to worry about. Then you would basically repeat that process until you're done covering the entire site. So that's the survey kit. Very cost effective at your local distributor, by the way. So just to sum up here, we talked about our long range and how we are known for our extensive reliability in the security industry. Now, some of the inherent benefits are, of course, not only saving labor, time, and cost, but you're saving the process of using, a lift or trenching. And also, today, and I think for this foreseeable near future, we want to spend as little time in our end user customers' offices and sites as possible. So getting in and getting out by putting in wireless is going to be a huge part of a compelling value proposition. Of course, we're going to preserve site aesthetics as well. And one thing that really sets Inovonics apart is we will truly integrate into any security system. And that gives you the ability to be flexible because we can go into different systems in different ways. And that's how we can really help contribute toward the overall physical security plan. And think about adding panic buttons on to round out the design of any physical security plan. So the last thing I'll say is think about sensing strategy, and feel free to reach out to me and I can discuss this with you when we're looking at how to decide what kind of a sensor is best for a given application. Let's look at the one on the bottom here, copper theft. We get that a lot. So someone's going to climb up on a roof. They're going to do tens of thousands of dollars of damage to an HVAC unit for 50 bucks worth of copper that they can go turn into recycling. So think about the trade-offs between how soon you can detect that threat occurring and nuisance alarm sources. So you could do a perimeter around the roof with motion sensors, and if you can minimize or eliminate those sources of nuisance alarms, then you can accomplish that and you'll detect the threat having occurred sooner. If nuisance alarms are a concern, you can get a specific contact set designed for these HVAC units, which will go on the asset itself. So you're going to have almost, well, you would be significantly reducing those sources of nuisance alarms, but you're detecting a little bit later. So think about those trade-offs, and then you can make, along with your customers, informed decisions as far as how to best arrive at the best choice of sensor. Thanks again, everybody, for joining today, and I am standing by to answer questions. Feel free to reach out, and I am here to help. Also, you will be getting a follow-up email, which will include today's gift card winner.